Radio.com. Fellow Freedom fans, David Allen Carmichael. Number here, 888-248-2046. Today's broadcast going to be a little bit different. I say weird things sometimes. I say our freedom comes in proportion to our faith. Sounds religious. Actually, it's kind of a divine intervention thing. So many things in the news, so many challenges to the way people think. There's so many strange things coming into play these days. Our world is going nuts right before our very eyes. And we see it as we entertain ourselves with the in-flight entertainment, watching mainstream media. Sometimes I say it's basically a in-flight entertainment while our plane is in a nosedive. So it's time to get our hands on the yoke so the yoke is not on us, and pull this thing out of the dive. Sometimes it takes a little positive intervention. Take note, watch the indicators. Keep your eye on the indicators. Trust your indicators. Your indicators are telling you that not only have you stalled, you are now in a dive. And there's only so much time. Eventually, you're going to get to the bottom of this drop, and there's going to be an impact. There's going to be a consequence that is unavoidable should you not take action today. So today I'm going to have a story. It's going to be faith-based. Isn't that, what do you mean faith-based? You'll have to hear it. It's actually divine intervention based. I was contemplating my show today, and I thought about, I think I'm just going to tell you a chronicle in real life. So tell your friends. There's this nut on the radio at 1240, 910, or 1190 a.m., depending where you are in this large footprint of broadcasting. And tell your friends, this guy's going to tell us a story about real life, what really happened. And you tell me, if you hear the story, you tell me whether there is really, are we all here by accident? Or is there somebody who has a desire to show off on our behalf, on behalf of those whose hearts are loyal to him? Is there really Almighty God, as some people say in the TV shows, the man upstairs, like Reagan called him, my friend upstairs? Okay. I did have a little talk with my friend upstairs when he got shot and was on the way to the hospital. So today is really our freedom comes in proportion to our faith, but I'm going to tell you a real life story. It's going to be strange. I've got an outline, and I'm going to start with something. I had, in one portion of my life, I wanted to know, I said, and I've heard people tell these stories. God, if you're out there, show yourself. Uh-oh, time's up. Too bad, so sad, you missed it. You're not there. Many people have that conversation. I played the story of Walid Shoebat, and he was an Islamic guy, a Muslim. And he said, Abraham, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, in the Bible, please show me the fault so I can lead my wife to Islam. Well, he read the Bible and found out that his Islam was in error. Oh, they're so bigoted. No, that's what he discovered. So there are people that say, if you're up there, do something. And I'm not going to go back to the day that I discovered the one who I sent that question to. What I'm going to do is, as I was going on in life, I'll tell you what happened. I was a young man, and this is for your college-age people especially. I was 21 years old. From the time of, let me just say, probably 15 to 21, I had a lot of stupid in me, and I didn't realize it. So I had a lot of stupid in me, so a lot of stupid in me came out. And I didn't realize it was a hormonal thing that you actually go crazy between the ages. Some people about 12 to 21. And then there's a point where your chemicals in your brain stabilize and you decide, oh my goodness, I'm an idiot. I need to do the right thing. So I was on the path of doing right things. And I was in the Navy, and I asked to get transferred to the East Coast. Why? Did I really want to go to Norfolk, Virginia? No way. I had like a disdain for Norfolk, Virginia, and I'd never even been there. I just had a disdain for anything east of I-5. So, that's Interstate 5. I was just a West Coast guy, raised on the West Coast, enjoyed it, loved it. I love the urban environment and the mountains and the beaches, and I just loved the West Coast. But what had happened is I had basically laid a trail from the age of knowing better, as a teenager, having enough sense to know between right and wrong, actually having God change my life to the right, and then doing the wrong things. And then once you do the wrong things after knowing better, you really feel like a worm. You really do. You feel like a real jerk. I know what Peter felt like after he denied Jesus. I mean, Peter denied Jesus just hours after Jesus told him he was going to do it. And after he said, "No way, I'll die for you." And then he really blew it. And I'm telling you what, the guy felt like a worm. But then Jesus approached him later and recommissioned him. "Get up, Peter, feed my sheep." Okay? You blew it. Okay. We know. Everybody knows you blew it. Now do what's right. So I came to a place in my life when I was 21. I realized, I've been blowing it. I need to do what's right. So I got orders to the East Coast. Time to push reset on my life. When I get to the East Coast, I'm starting over. Nobody knows how much of an idiot I've been in the last few years. So I started over. And I did not want to, let's say, have a relationship with any young ladies. Because part of my insanity had to do with my chemicals in my brain. I mean, come on, you don't want to be confusing your brain with chemicals that come about when you are influenced by the young lady. So I had no intentions. I had every intention of making sure that I was not pursuing young ladies. I was pursuing Christians. I wanted to find people who loved Jesus, and I wanted to hang out with them. And that was it. Now, I will tell you that young ladies at that age, I was stupid enough to think, I was too stupid to know that young ladies at that age aren't really thinking that. "Oh, I'm just looking for Christians to hang out with." Especially if they've been raised in church. You know what they want? A husband. They really want a husband. Okay. Now, I wasn't thinking that way. So, either way, I'm going through life and just kind of bopping around, and I don't know, just kind of meeting people, enjoying their company. And then I got transferred to Pascagoula, Mississippi. That's where my ship went for overhaul. And while I was there, I show up one day. This is a story in real life. And one day, it's a Wednesday, and I said to myself, no, I actually prayed to God, and I said, "Almighty God, I am interested in going to church, and I want to plug into a church and stay there. And I know that that's where I need to be. I need to be a place. So I've only got 10 months here. So what am I going to do?" So I start praying. I say, "Lord, I'm going to go to some place. And if I can find one person at some church, I don't care how dead this thing seems." Because you can walk in some pretty dead churches. Don't know why people are there. And if there's one person who loves Jesus, guess what? I'm going to stay. So that's what I said. I'm on my way. I'm walking down Ingalls Avenue, up Ingalls Avenue, whichever you want to say. And I said, and I was praying that, and I passed by a church. Doors are closed. No, I guess I'm not going there. So I kept walking. I turned left on Market Street, and I'm cruising along on Market Street. And and there's this church, Calvary Baptist Church. And here it was. The doors were open. Looked at the little timeline. Ooh, they're going to have a little service here in an hour or so. So I walked in, and there was this guy, Mr. Segalis. He was about 70 years old. And you know what? He saw me. He came up to me. He's all excited. He greeted me. He introduced himself, and he says, "Do you know my Jesus?" And I realized this guy loves Jesus. So guess what? I'm stuck. I made a vow. I'm stuck. Whether this whole place is dead or not, there's one person that I can identify with, and it was Mr. Segalis. So I said, "We're good to go, man. I don't care who else I meet here." But then it happened. Then it happened. I was struck. There was a young lady there who caught my attention. I haven't met her. I haven't talked to her. And I am struck. I'm fascinated. I'm pleased. I'm Twitter pated. I'm messed up. So I was attracted, but I went, okay, just pay attention. Pay attention. So I paid attention to the sermon. I came back Sunday, and I saw that young lady again, and then Sunday night I actually met the young lady, and they all went out to Pizza Hut or something like that afterward. I actually talked to the young lady. and I was smitten. I was messed up. I was mesmerized. I was out. My brain was gone. It was like, oh, and now here I was. I didn't want that. I didn't want that. So here's where my story's going: divine intervention. So I prayed again. I said, and I'm actually, now this is strange. I didn't know what the culture in California wasn't a problem being alone with a young lady, especially in a platonic thing. But yeah, I was a liberated man. But she gave me a ride to the base. She had this really cool car. She was a 1937 Chevy with a Uga horn, And so I got her to give me a ride in this car because somebody said, hey, you need a ride back to your where you're staying at the ship. And I said, sure. So this young lady, which is totally inappropriate, I wouldn't let my daughters do that, but she gave me a ride back to the base. And on the way, in the right seat of this 37 Chevy, I'm praying, and I said, Lord, take me out of my vow. I repent of my vow. I vowed that I would not change churches. I would not go church hopping. But Lord, I am this is not good. I am totally, completely attracted to this young lady. And this is not what I want. I want to just focus in on you, work on my self-control, my discipleship, my discipline, and my faith. This is the kind of things I want to focus on. And I do not need a distraction because I'm undisciplined as it is. Don't need a distraction. So I'm praying while this girl, and it wasn't that far. I mean, it's like a mile and a half, or maybe a mile down the road, maybe, and from the Pizza Hut. And so I'm praying. It's a quick prayer. And all of a sudden, this is where my story goes, folks. And stick with me, especially if you're college age. I actually had God talk to me. Is this just my mind? Is it just a figment of my imagination? Am I schizophrenic? Do I need to take some chemicals to turn off these strange voices in my head? And the Lord said to me, pursue her. Now, how do you know it was God? That's a whole different, second. Let me just tell you, he said, pursue her. And I got a sense that it would be wrong, actually wrong, for me to go to any other church, and that the Lord was not letting me off my vow. And he told me to pursue her. Now, you can say, oh, it's God schizophrenic. Those of you who don't believe in God. And it all worked out, by the way, we're married today. So we don't know. I mean, if nothing came of it, if it was damaging, you say, well, was that really God? Or you just dope and smoke? But this word came to me, and I was praying. And the response was, pursue her. Pursue her. Turned out she was only 17 and I was 21, on the verge of being 22. I mean, literally in about, less than 40 days, I was going to be 22 or something like that. Maybe it was 2 months, something like that. And she's 17, just turned 17. Pursue her. Pursue her? Oh my goodness. What a cradle robber. Pursue her? And I immediately was like, Lord, pursue her means only one thing. Why would I waste her time or mine to pursue her, especially when I'm focused on my discipleship, unless you want me to marry her? Isn't that the point? So you know what I did? It probably took me about a week to contemplate all this. And I knew within a week I was going to marry her. You know why? Because the Lord began to show me that I was supposed to pursue her, and it was his plan. So that's my question today. Does this stuff really happen? I'm going to review. We talk about the issues on a constitutional basis, a biblical basis, the basis of right versus wrong. Is there something bigger than this? Is there a bigger plan? Is there something we're supposed to submit to? Is there a plan we're supposed to get in on for the good of ourselves, for the good of those who we relate to, our families, our community, and ultimately the planet? Is it possible? Or is what they're telling you in school, you came from nothing, you are nothing, you're going to nothing? And then, of course, tell you a new morality. See, if you came from nothing, you are nothing, there should be no morality. But this higher morality says boys marrying boys should be exalted. The murder of the unborn should be exalted. Everything but Christianity ought to be exalted. Is it possible that is an evidence that Christianity, the teachings of Jesus, and the history leading up to that are actually all true. That you can connect those dots and go, uh-oh, there's something real going on here. So David Allen Carmichael, I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you another story in real life today. 888-248-2046, preservativetalkradio.com. Stay tuned and go online to copperhead1240.com all the time.
.com. Take Copperhead Radio to listen on the go. On your smartphone, download TuneIn, then search for Copperhead 1240. Watch the Copperhead live at Ustream.tv. And of course, you can always follow us on Twitter.
What'd you say?
Copperhead Radio. And like us at Facebook.com/Copperhead1240. So there you go. Whether you're listening on the radio, watching us on television, taking us along with your smartphone, or just socializing on Facebook, make Copperhead Radio a part of your daily routine.
Copperhead 1240, Southern Rock, kicking country.
It isn't. So where do you try to get your young ladies?
Hunting, fishing, NASCAR, Tennessee talk, Southern Rock, kicking country. Copperhead 1240, 1190, and 910 a.m. A popular myth that chain drugstores are the best place to go for your prescriptions. Not true. Hamilton Discount Pharmacy and East Ridge Pharmacy have a growing list of customers who love discount prices and personal service. Saturation marketing.
Well, that's not what I went into church for.
The real story.
I went to church to follow the Lord, and I ended up meeting the young lady.
Local economy.
You know, I ended up going, I'm going to have to go to a different church.
The power of the independent player in prescription drugs. Visit Hamilton Discount Pharmacy at Shallowford and Lee Highway and East Ridge Pharmacy on Ringgold Road at Spring Creek. Call 892-5955, 892-5955.
Oh, absolutely.
For Hamilton Discount Pharmacy
that's good. That's a good input.
And East Ridge
Don't
Pharmacy
go to church
on Ringgold Road in Spring Creek.
As a predator.
For Hamilton Discount Pharmacy and East Ridge Pharmacy.
Expect a mild start to your Friday. We'll see a few more clouds and a few scattered showers around. High temperatures still pleasant, right around 80 tonight. Lows into the mid-60s, and for the weekend, still a bit unsettled with scattered showers. Maybe a thunder shower popping up with highs through Sunday, only 80 to 82. When you're on the go, try Belvita breakfast biscuits. They're made with delicious ingredients and carefully baked to give you steady energy all morning long. That's Belvita. Try them as part of your morning routine. And I'm WDEF.
Okay, well, you know what I'm going to do is when we come back, I'm going to bring that up. Okay, I'm going to put emotional, physical attraction. So I'm taking notes on what you said.
Tennessee talk, Southern Rock, kicking country.
No. It's a good. You did good. You kind of said, well, you kind of gave me the other hand to think about here.
Egypt is mourning more than 600 people who were killed in this week's government crackdowns.
My relative was shot in the back with live ammunition. That destroyed his liver. He was killed in Rabat. We have a medical report from the hospital proving this.
No, you're right.
We have a burial.
No, that's good. That is a good thing to bring up. So that's what I'm going to do.
Start shortly. CBS's Alex Ortiz is there.
Yeah. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that up, and then I'm going to go on to my next story.
They're calling a day of
Sounds good. Thanks, Sean.
This after Egypt continued to count the death toll from the massacre 2 days ago. The Muslim Brotherhood says it will continue to protest peacefully, but there are real fears that Egypt's civil strife is only getting worse.
There's new trouble for embattled New York Yankee star Alex Rodriguez. CBS's Don Daler with a breaking story.
60 Minutes has learned that in February, members of Yankee slugger Alex Rodriguez's inner circle leaked handwritten documents implicating two other players in connection with baseball's doping investigation. In late January, the Miami New Times published an article highlighting Rodriguez's extensive use of performance-enhancing drugs and charged other unnamed players with also using PEDs. Sources say that days later, associates of Rodriguez at that time obtained copies of those same documents and gave them to Yahoo Sports, this time naming names.
Those names included Yankee teammate Francisco Cervelli and the Brewers' Ryan Braun. Rodriguez's attorney says the The 60 Minutes report is, quote, untrue. A government spy agency isn't supposed to spy on Americans in this country, but a published report says it does. CBS's Larry Miller.
The NSA broke rules on privacy thousands of times each year since Congress granted it new powers in 2008. Citing documents supplied by NSA leaker Edward Snowden, the Washington Post reports most breaches involved unauthorized surveillance of Americans or foreign intelligence targets inside the U.S. Digital rights advocate Trevor Timm.
This is what one would expect when there is little to no oversight of a massive secret surveillance program.
Most breaches were due to violating standard operating procedures.
Firefighters say they're gaining ground on the wildfire outside Park City, Utah. Some evacuees were allowed to go home briefly.
One young couple, we got the wedding dress. They were planning on getting married Saturday, and the dress was in the house, which was in the fire, and we were able to get that out.
Fire spokesman Steve Rutter says the flames are now about 50% contained. More than a dozen homes have been torched. New sexual harassment accusations against San Diego's Mayor Bob Filner. This time, Peggy Shannon, a 67-year-old part-time worker on the City Hall senior desk.
Every day that I went to work, I had butterflies in my stomach because I did not know what was going to happen the next time the mayor came by my desk.
She says it's time for Filner to go. He says he won't. S&P futures are up 4. This is CBS News.
The Copperhead 1240, Southern Rock, Kickin' Country, Tennessee Talk.
The Man Radio Station.
Copperhead 1240.
Fellow Freedom fans, David Allen Carmichael had a good call on the break. And the number here is 888-248-2046. I told the story about going to church and being struck by a young lady. Yes, I was struck, asking God to let me off my vow. I said I promised to go to one church, but here I was struck, and I wanted to be left off the hook so that I could go someplace else so I wouldn't be distracted, so I could pursue my Christian discipleship. And I got a word that said, pursue her. Pursue her. The caller said, you know, and this is in so many words, but essentially that they had said, well, you know, hey, if I'm interested in having a young lady for it's an appropriate thing, it's not good that man should live alone. Why not go to church to find young ladies who are, you know, focused on the Lord, hopefully, presumably. Well, and then, of course, the caller talked about going for the wrong reasons. I said, joking, I said, you know, I kind of summed up what they were saying. They said they were going more for emotional, physical attraction reasons. Again, I'm not really using their words perfectly, but it does come up. This idea is there are guys that go to churches to be predators for women, and it's dangerous. It's highly dangerous. And so my caller gave me some good things. Hey, make sure you bring out this point here, that's really not what we ought to be doing. We ought to be literally, and I think he really encouraged me in this, that is you go seeking the Lord. And this is what my wife tells young people as she works with young people. She says, seek God. And you may find that while you're seeking God, he's going to bring the right person alongside who's seeking God. And if both of you will love God more than each other, you will ultimately love each other better than you ever could by yourself. So that's the kind of thing my wife teaches young people. And that's how it came along. She was seeking God. And when I introduced myself, what struck her, in fact, she ended up being struck, is somebody that Sunday night said, hey, what are you doing here? You know, what's this guy from Southern California being in the place where the squirrel went berserk? In the First Uprighteous Church in Pascagoula. So, you know, what are you doing here? They're like, what are you doing here? That kind of tone. I said, instead of saying, well, my ship's in the shipyard, blah, 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 I said, I'm seeking God. Because there was two elements to the question. What are you doing? What are you doing here in Pascagoula at this church? So I said, I'm seeking God. And my wife, at the time was just a 17-year-old, goes, whoa, that's what I'm doing. Whoa, we're of a kindred spirit, as you hear on Anne of Green Gables. We're of a kindred spirit. So all of a sudden she's interested, and she wasn't looking. So that is the point. Is seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. I mean, that's included in that. So I was encouraged by my caller, and caller encouraged you, just stick with it, stick with your discipleship, and walk by faith, not by sight. Good job. Now we're going to go to the next story. The next story is hey, guess what? I married my wife. We had a courtship. We had to exercise self-control because we liked each other, not just spiritually. We were both very attracted to one another. Probably had only about a tenth of the amount of, let's say, chaperoning that we probably ought to have had. So we had to do some very deliberate things to make sure we kept our hands off of each other. Okay. And so that was good training. In fact, we did a lot of Bible study. You know why? We had to. Trust me. Let's study the Bible. Oh, why don't you guys go out and do something? And no, this is telling her parents, no, we're going to stay here in the living room doing Bible study. That's what we're going to do. Okay? Very attractive young lady. So, and she was attracted by me, notwithstanding my attractiveness, because it was a divine intervention. We got married. We got married just a little over a year after we met. I was in the Navy. That's a long story. So we got married. And in the early part of our marriage, we went to this seminar called Institute in Basic Life Principles. It was Bill Gothard, and he teaches this thing about how to live according to biblical principles. So we took that, we started applying that in our lives. So whether we get a divine, David, do the following thing. Go to Pharaoh. Without getting that kind of thing, you can go through life successfully. If you take what he has already said and told somebody to write down and apply it in your life, you reap the benefits. Give, and it'll be given unto you. The borrower is a slave. I was going to say servant, and I stopped in the middle and said slave. So we had a lot of s in there. Slave to the lender. So don't be indebted. Don't be in debt. Give, don't borrow. And if somebody asks you to borrow, give. So that's a principle that we learned to do that. So we targeted ourselves getting out of debt. Then there's other things about how to treat one another. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Don't expect her to submit to you. Your job is to pay attention to giving your life for her. And then watch what happens. Wives, don't go around saying, you're not loving me properly. Spend your time focusing on submitting. Watch what happens. Oh my goodness. It's a knee-jerk response. So these little tricks in the Bible of truth that tell you how to behave. In a multitude of counselors, there is safety. The fool does what is right in his own eyes, but he who listens to counsel is wise. So these principles there. So go ahead and do them. You don't need a big glowing burning bush that is not consumed. Just do what he has written down there. So we began to do that in our lives. And seeing the awesome response, there were things that were happening in our lives that were really, really, really good. Started to get miracles happening. When we went to get out of debt after this, I committed to getting out of debt. Now, most people say, well, God wants me out of debt. I'm going to stop tithing. I'm going to take the tithe and put it toward debt. Otherwise, it is helping, do what he wants us to do. We're being obedient. No, get out of debt and tithe. Give, and it'll be given unto you. So we not only tithe, we actually gave beyond that. So this is not to get an earthly reward. I'm just telling you what happened. We started to give beyond that. And my goal was to be out of debt by December 31st of that year. And this is in January, February, something like that. So I signed up for the church flowers for the last weekend in December. I was going to buy the decorative flowers on the altar or wherever you put it. And I signed up, and it was to celebrate being debt-free. So I was committed. We're going to be out of debt this year. What happened is in October, I was out of debt. We paid our last car payment in July or August, and we had our credit card payoff by October. And then in November, my wife needed to have surgery. She had sudden emergency surgery on her jaw, her teeth, and it was going to cost a lot of money. And so we needed the money. And now here we are out of debt, but immediately we have this bill that comes up, and it was going to be the first week in December. Well, the next thing that happens, the Navy sends me on a training event up to Washington, D.C., and they give you money for food, and you can starve for 30 days, or you can spend $1 gazillion every day for food. It doesn't matter. They're going to give you the same amount. They just give you a flat amount, and you've got to feed yourself. Well, it turned out I found good ways to get by eating and save at the same time. It paid for my wife's surgery. So a few other things happened, we're right near the end of the year, and I didn't have enough money to buy the flowers that I had committed to. And you know what thought came to me? Put it on the credit card because you don't have the money. Of course, I didn't do it. And it was like 2 days prior to the last day of the year or last Sunday of the year. And sure enough, the money came in and we took care of it. So we ended the year completely out of debt, but I was still tempted to do the wrong thing. So that's the kind of lifestyle we're leading, is try to do what God said, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it's scary. Do what it says and then watch what happens. So we began to see that there's literal principles in nature. You know, God is instituted these things. You act a certain way and you're going to get certain temporal rewards. Statistically, it's going to happen. You know, we can't cancel all disease on the earth. So that stuff comes to you sometimes. But there's just cause and effect that you can put into place by acting according to what he's told us in the Bible. So we started doing it. But then one day, now here's where it gets crazy. My pastor was just impressed that he needed to have this guy come preach to us, have like a, you know what they call it, like a revival or something like that, where you have a guest speaker. And he just wants a church. It's going to be when they sing for Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. He wants everybody there as much as possible every night to hear this guy speak. His name was Manly Beasley. I'd never heard of the guy. But he came in and my pastor said, this guy's got so much faith, I want him to speak to us. So he came in to speak. And this first night, it might have been the first or second night, but early on in his talk, he told a story that I'm going to relay to you. And then again, for all you skeptics, all you atheists, all of us who doubt, because it's good to be a skeptic. It's good to examine. I'm going to tell you the story that he told me, and then I'm going to tell you what I did about it, and then what happened. This really happened. It's being recorded. This guy, Manly Beasley, he says, you know, we were kind of prideful in our music program, pretty excited about our singing and praising the Lord. We started to worship ourselves, I thought, on how well we sing to the Lord. Well, I think this guy picked up on that. And he came up and he says, you know, I went and spoke to a group. He says, you guys think you're all excited about your music. He said, this was literally at a tent meeting. And these guys were so excited during the worship time, the praising and singing, that they literally had people shimmying up the poles of the tent poles, holding up this big tent and praising the Lord. Hallelujah. Real excited. Woo-hoo-hoo. Doing a good show of how excited they were about the Lord. And then came time for the offering. He says it was worse than a funeral. These guys got so quiet, so it was depressing when came time for the offering. And he was sitting there, he's about to preach, and he's ticked off. He's angry at this group who are so in such hypocrisy, were so excited about praising the Lord until it came time to give. And he settled in his own heart. He says, I'm not going to take a dime out of whatever they're given today, because I need to rebuke them, and I need them to know that none of this is going to me. So he settled in his heart. They're doing their little offering thing. And I think he had $7 on himself that he came with. And so at the end of this offering, he spoke and he rebuked this crowd for their hypocrisy. He said, you're so excited doing all this until it came time to giving. I'm telling you, I'm not going to take a dime from this. You're going to give to your own church. But this time you're going to seek out your heart. You're going to find out what kind of things that you're hoarding in your life, that you're fearful. You can't celebrate giving to God. You don't believe him. So he rebukes them. And he says, guys, get up and take another offering. Do it right. Okay, so they take an offering and he sits down and he says, while he was sitting there, God spoke to him. And he said, well, what about your $7? And then he responded. He's in a dialogue. He's either schizophrenic or he's got a dialogue with God. But watch what happens. He says, well, Lord, I need a shaving kit. You know, I'm shaving right now. I just got here today, but I need to be back tomorrow. And I don't have anything to shave with. I was going to use this money I had to buy a shaving kit. And then the Lord rebuked him. He says, you are a hypocrite. You just rebuked everybody, saying that you believed that they did not believe me. But here you don't believe me to take care of your need after rebuking these guys. You're a hypocrite. So God rebukes him. And when the guys finished up bringing up plates, sometimes you'll see they're bringing an offering. They kind of lay it on the floor at the front of the church or whatever, wherever they put it. So he got up and he walked over and he put his money into the plate. And he kind of felt bad. And he's like, and he wasn't even able to have joy with that because he realized he was being rebuked. He was being chastised. And he was really just trying to make things right that in his heart were wrong. So he puts it in the plate. He has his little sermon. He preaches, does whatever he's going to do. The time goes, completes. They're winding down. And a guy comes up to him afterwards and he says, brother, he says, I know this is kind of weird. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I was getting ready to come tonight and God told me to bring you this. And and he felt embarrassed, like this had never happened to him, but God spoke to him, he said, to bring you this. What did he bring him? A shaving kit. A shaving kit. So how about that, atheists? Coincidence? That's pretty weird. Two people, schizophrenics, simultaneous, hear these voices in their head. One, you need to quit your whining. You need to stop being a hypocrite. You need to give what you have, whether you like it or not. You've got a roof over your head tonight. You're going to have a meal. Just do what I'm telling you to do. So he gives some money. And it's still kind of frustrated. And somebody going, wow, this is really weird. This is the first time this thing ever happened to me, but God spoke to me. And I think he told me to do this. And he brings him a shaving kit. So at the end of this week, I wanted that. And I prayed and I said, God, I want to know what it is to have faith like that guy. I want to know what it is to have you speak to me and I obey it, even if it sets me up for a fall. I want that sort of faith. You know, it says in the Bible that he hears what we ask for. Isn't that something? David Allen Carmichael, Preservative Talk Radio, stories in real life. Stay tuned. Tell your friends. We'll be right back.
Southern Rock, Kickin' Country, Copperhead 1240, 1190, and 910 a.m. This is big news. Wesley's Corner Store on Dallas Hollow Road in Soddy Daisy is now accepting BILO cards. That's right. At Wesley's Corner Store in Soddy Daisy, Dallas Hollow Road, you can now use your BILO card on all of your gas purchases. Save big right now at Wesley's Corner Store, Dallas Hollow Road in Soddy Daisy, accepting BILO cards. And through this month, save big on tobacco products. Grizzlies any flavor roll, $9.99. Copenhagen starting at $9.99 at Wesley's Corner Store in Soddy Daisy. You'll always find what you need, from lottery tickets to the lowest prices on fuel featuring non-ethanol gas. Wesley's Corner Store in Soddy Daisy. Now every evening you can enjoy fresh baked pizza at Wesley's Corner Store. Cheese pizza just $7.99. Meat pizza or pepperoni just $8.99. 2 for $7.99. Delicious fresh baked pizza every evening now at Wesley's Corner Store, Dallas Hollow Road in Soddy Daisy.
You and your sweetheart need to spend some time together? Want to learn something sweet, fun, and cultivated? Ballroom dancing is a gratifying way to spend an evening. If you want to learn all the basic steps and press your hand into the small of her back, join us for lessons starting today. At the Ballroom of Hickson, you'll learn all the basic steps with your gal and have a great time. Trained ballroom instructors bring you along in fine order. No partner required. Click theballroomathickson.com. or call 394-6428. Call for a great time. 394-6428. Click theballroomathickson.com or call 394-6428. 394-6428. Theballroomathickson.com.
Copperhead 1240, Southern Rock, Kickin' Country, Tennessee Talk.
The Man Radio Station. Hunting, fishing, NASCAR, Tennessee Talk, Southern Rock, Kickin' Country, Copperhead 1240, 1190, and 910 a.m.
Fellow Freedom fans, just finishing a Facebook post about my crazy topic today. Telling true stories. Isn't that something? Told you about the pastor who preached and found himself guilty of not obeying his own sermon, and he caved in and he actually got reproved by, yes, a voice from heaven said, give the money in your pocket, your $7. But Lord, I need to buy a shaving kit. Give the money. Don't be a hypocrite. So he gives the money to this congregation. None of this money's coming back to him, of course. And then after this whole event, somebody walks up to him just sheepishly and admitted that he heard a voice from heaven that told him that he was supposed to be giving the man a shaving kit. So does that stuff really happen? I was going to tell you another story. I've got on my little outline another story to share. To share. We use the word share. We're going to share with you. Yeah, I've got it, and I can give some away. That's why we call it sharing. So, do real men hear voices from God? Do real men hear voices? Do real men make a decision to do everything, or do real men tap into a higher source? Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. He's either lying, could be false. What if it's true? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And as I was sitting here, I thought about a different story. I was going to tell you the story of, well, after this, what happened. Now, I'll come back to it because I set it up. I said at the end of this, or the end of his sermon, this was the first night of the week, and I had to be there. I lived 34 miles away, so we were driving every night. So this was Sunday night, or Sunday morning and Sunday night. I heard him. And so I'm no doubt it was by Sunday night, I'm saying, God, I want that kind of faith. I want to know what it is to hear your voice and to obey, even though obeying would seem on its face to be the stupid thing to do. I want that kind of faith. I want what he's got. So I asked God for it. I mean, I literally did. And I had to go to every one of these things because I was the guitar guy in the sing-along thing. And then come Wednesday night, he said, we've got one more night here. Tomorrow night is the last night. He says, and we're not going to have any music. You're not going to get distracted by your singing. And again, I think he figured out there was a little bit of people were worshiping their music program. And I was a guitarist, okay? So I thought it was that way. But he obviously picked that up. So he said, tomorrow we're not going to do any music. So I was actually tempted to not come back on Thursday night because I was driving 34 miles each way. So that's 68-mile round trip per day. And so I thought, well, I don't have to be here. I had to be here every night. I've been every other night. I could take a break. But then I thought, no, we're out seeking to hear from the Lord through this man. And I had made a prayer, Lord, I want that kind of faith. So I'll tell you what happened. The last night of this event, how many of you sat in church at the end of it during the invitation time? The Savior is waiting to enter your heart, just as I am, without one plea. So they've got the invitation going, and you're acting like in a prayer position or something like that, and you're really thinking about something else. The last night of this event, guess what I was thinking about? It's sick. Indicated severe idolatry issues. I was thinking about a video game that I had, this helicopter thing. I mean, I was distracted. This is the last night of a big faith speaker, and during the invitation time. Now, of course, it's kind of prayer-ish, in and out, but it's more thinking about a video game. Sick, but true. And something interrupted me. So before I tell you what happened, I'm going to tell you the story. When I thought about this, the guy coming up to the person and being really sheepish and going, I think God talked to me and he told me to bring you this brand new shaving kit. Obviously, divine intervention, man. Divine intervention. I've got stories like that. I got stories where God told somebody to do something 2 weeks earlier than my crisis. And then in the middle of my crisis, they're like, ooh, God speaks to him and says, I told you to do the following thing for David. So I'm going to tell you those today. They weren't even on my list, but I'm going to tell you. So before I tell you what happened at the end of this week, I'm going to tell you another story. Later on in life, after a big obedience, I had obeyed God. I'd lost my job, lost my career, lost my retirement, lost my reputation, all over a, God, you want me to what? You want me to what? You have got to be kidding. You know what this is going to do to my wife, to my children, to my reputation, to my career, to my retirement, my ability to survive? You want me to what? Okay, I had those conversations. Sounds very irreverent. But after being obedient and losing my job, getting my wife upset, putting my children at jeopardy, losing my reputation, upsetting the church because of my obedience, either I'm crazy or God's actually telling me to do something. Well, after I did that, after I lost my job and I started making money again, I had another conversation. God, you want me to what? You want me to stop teaching for money? You want me to just teach people job skill training for free? Are you, I mean, literally saying to the creator of heaven and earth, are you nuts? Or do you think I'm crazy? Am I crazy? Is this really you? You want me to what? So I started teaching people job skills for free, for no offering, for free. I started doing that for free. And I sent out a letter to people saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. Most of these people thought I was a nut. Many of these people are talking about me behind my back and are defaming me among the church. So my standing in the church is diminishing while I'm out doing this crazy job that needs to have people of faith supporting it. So I just told people what I was doing, and some people started sending support. And whether they sent support or not, I just did it. So here I am, having to write newsletters to keep people up to date. And many of these people on my newsletter list are offended by me. They hate me more every time they get a letter from me, and I'm aware of it. Okay. I mean, I'm aware of it. So I'm sitting in the office. I've got my studios in my office, and I was on the other side of the wall I'm next to right now, but I was on the other side of my office. And I was whining. I'm putting together and I'm stuffing envelopes. I just had enough ink to print these things out, and I don't have money to buy any more ink. I don't have money to buy more paper. I didn't have money at the time to buy groceries. I was right on the edge, complete lack of money, and here I am stuffing all these envelopes. And you know I didn't have stamps. You know what I didn't have? Money to buy the stamps. And I'm stuffing envelopes that are labeled, and every one that I'm looking at, I'm trying to put some nice little note in there as I'm sending this letter out. And I'm looking on the list on the envelope, and I'm thinking, I think I perceive this person despises me. And I almost had, well, these people like me pile, and these people are indifferent, so I'm going to keep them up to date. You never know. Some of them may be inspired to support us someday, or they'll be encouraged in their faith. Something will happen. Then here's this pile over here of people that are family or friends, or at one time were friends, totally despise me because they think I'm a heretic. They think I'm leading my family into destruction, and they despise me. But they're on my newsletter list. And I start whining, and I say, God, I'm literally whining. There's people in the Bible that whined, and I'm whining. And I don't want to send these people a letter. For one, it's embarrassing to go talk to somebody that hates your guts. It really is. And somebody who ought to love you because they're family. And it's embarrassing. And I start whining to the Lord, and I said, Lord, I don't even have stamps. And I was in a really, really bad mood. I was in a blue funk, my wife calls it. A blue funk. I was in it. And I had the door to my office closed, which I rarely have the door. I was kind of like, leave me alone. I don't want anybody to bother me. I don't even want to be near people. I'm upset, but I'm doing my job. The job I don't like. Or the part of the job I don't like. And so the mail comes, and my daughter, she was about 10 years old at the time, Bethany, she goes, and she knew I was in a blue funk. But this is my daughter. This is one with faith. This is definitely a faith person of my offspring, especially. Now, the other ones are too, but she's especially my faith person, faith gift. So she, by faith, knocks on the door in knowing she's interrupting me, knowing I'm in a bad mood. but felt compelled that she needed to give me the mail. So she walks in, and I'm kind of almost said, I may have said something to her of like, what are you doing? Why are you bothering me? I'm busy. I got the door closed. I got it for a reason. And I may have said, when I have the door closed, I'm trying to not be disturbed. Yeah, I know, but I thought you needed this. So she walks in with the mail, and I don't need the mail right now. So, and then as I'm whining and I'm depressed, and then I'll tell you, just before she came in, I will tell you, I capitulated. I reluctantly said, okay, God, after complaining, I actually got a word from God. Either I'm schizophrenic, I'm hearing voices, and it's chemically driven, or there's a possibility that all the atheists are incorrect. And God rebukes me, and he says to me, I've given you those because I have a purpose for it, not you. And he told me to give a letter to everybody on my list. Just do it. Quit your whining and do what you're supposed to do. So I admitted, Lord, I'm in sin. Kind of like the guy who finally gave his money to the offering plate. I reluctantly admitted it. Okay, I'm going to do my job. I'm a jerk. I'll do it. I'm going to do it. Even though it's embarrassing, I'm going to do it, Lord. And I just relinquished it to God, even though I wasn't happy. My daughter knocks on the door. And I told her, I'm not supposed to be disturbed. And she says, well, I thought you needed this. So I just set it down. And I'm thinking, since when is the mail an emergency? I literally thought that. I almost said it, but I didn't. I held my tongue because I just admitted to God I would do what he had me do. But I wanted to say, since when is the mail an emergency? So I set it down. I wasn't going to look at it. But as I was there, the Lord began to impress upon me I was supposed to pick up the mail. And I don't want to do that. I want to do this unpleasant task and get it over with. No, I'm supposed to pick up the mail. So I go and I look up, and there's a card. You can tell it's one like a thank you note kind of thing. It's not a real letter. It's just kind of a too overly square envelope. And I open it up, and there's a note in it, and there's books of stamps. There's not money. There are books of stamps. And I will tell you, I can't go describe to you how much I was whining about and debating with the Lord, and continued to say, but Lord, I don't even have the stamps to mail them. And I said it with my mouth. Lord, I don't even have the stamps to mail them. And I was whining and complaining. My daughter interrupts me. I open the envelope, and it has books of stamps. And so then I read this letter, and it said something. There's kind of a prayerful encouragement to this. Now, I tell you what, there's this kid at camp where you saw on TV, I used to have biceps. So people thought I looked like Popeye. Okay, so I'm a big, hairy man, big, strong, scary, hairy man. A big, strong, scary, hairy man, able or ought to be crying. I'm telling you what, I broke down like a baby because I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. Here I am whining, Lord, and I'm angry. I don't even have the stamps to send these things. And I open this up, and there's books of stamps and an encouragement to just do what the Lord has told you to do. I was embarrassed. How about that, atheist? Now, the end of the story, I want to tell you, I tracked this lady down at church. Next time I saw her, it's like a week and a half later. I said, you got to tell me what was going on, because I'm telling you, I had a big worship time, had a big humiliating confession of sin, and I began to start stuffing these envelopes with joy now, even to those people that despised me. I actually was happy. Oh my goodness, we got a God thing going on here. There's got the miracle in progress, man. I can be excited about this nuisance. Woohoo! I literally got excited. Now, a week and a half later, I tracked this lady down. I said, what? Hey, and she goes, and I was thanking her, and she was embarrassed. She was so embarrassed. She goes, I am so sorry. And I said, no, I need you to tell me the story. And she was one of these people who had never necessarily heard voices from God. She wasn't schizophrenic like me. And she said that she was wanting to give us a gift and was praying about it, and the Lord told her to give me stamps. This is obviously way before my whining session. And she says that God told her to give her stamps. She says, I was so embarrassed. I started arguing with God, she says, because she says, but Lord, he can buy stamps with money. He can buy food with money. He can buy stamps with money. If he needs stamps, he can do that. And she felt all of a sudden like she was in sin because God wanted her to send me stamps. And so she put stamps, and she was embarrassed. I'm so sorry. Kind of like the guy bringing up the shaving kit. I know this is weird. So then I began to tell her the story of how I was sitting there whining, saying, I don't even have stamps. And you want me to what? Our freedom comes in proportion to our faith. To obey is better than sacrifice, to heed rather than the fat of lambs. David Allen Carmichael, Preservative Talk Radio. We'll be right back.
So enjoy today. The Man Radio Station.
I will roll the world.
Hunting, fishing, NASCAR, Tennessee Talk, Southern Rock, Kickin' Country. 1240 The Copperhead.
Whose broad stripes for the right sweet we're so history.
The Man Radio Station. Hunting, fishing, NASCAR, Tennessee Talk, Southern Rock, Kickin' Country. WSDQ Dunlap, WEPG South Pittsburgh, The Copperhead, WSDT Saudi Daisy, Chattanooga.
CBS News, I'm Peter King. Prayers in Egypt and new protests in Cairo as the Muslim Brotherhood calls for a day of rage. CBS's Charlie Daggett.
The military is bracing for the worst here in Cairo. They've taken up positions around Tahrir Square and at other flashpoints, key points around the city. They're also trying to protect government installations.
There's been gunfire and tear gas reported in Cairo. Demonstrations are popping up all over the country. Al Jazeera English reporter Jane Ferguson is in Alexandria.
Many police vehicles in the street. We in fact saw tanks on the main Cairo into Alexandria road, tanks on either side of the road there guarding the main entrance point with gunners at the ready.
At least 12 protesters are reported killed in 2 other cities. CBS's Clarissa Ward says the government crackdowns could send the Muslim Brotherhood underground.
We're going to see young men who are angry, who feel that they cannot affect change at the ballot box and that the only way to do this is through violence.
Alex Rodriguez's lawyer denies a 60 Minutes report the Yankees star implicated 2 other players in baseball's doping scandal. Rodriguez's inner circle allegedly leaked documents days after his was the only name mentioned in a Miami newspaper that connected him to a medical clinic in South Florida. CBS's Don Dahler.
If baseball proves members of Rodriguez's camp in February prematurely released the name of a player suspected of using PEDs, that would be a direct violation of the collective bargaining agreement and would strike a major league blow to his appeal.
He's appealing a 215-game suspension. A new report shows that the National Security Agency spied illegally on Americans at home thousands of times. CBS News national security expert Juan Zarate says that's not much, given the amount of data it collects on any given day.
This is just further elaboration and detail as to how these programs work and the fact that there are instances where there is overreach.
Just out, new numbers showing July housing starts up 6% from June. Commerce Department says construction on apartment buildings rose 26%. Single-family homes were down 2.2%. A new report says obesity is a bigger killer than we previously believed. Here's CBS's Larry Miller.
The number of Americans who die prematurely from obesity has been vastly underestimated. It's actually 4 times greater than previously thought. Research in the American Journal of Public Health finds more than 18% of premature deaths are associated with excess body mass. African American women have the highest death rate, 27%. The research also found the probability of death among the overweight rises steeply after the age of 60.
Firefighters appear to be taming that huge wildfire near Park City, Utah.
We've turned the corner so far, and things are looking really well.
Fire spokesman Steve Rutter says that blaze is about 50% contained thanks to low winds, higher humidity. He says the flames have destroyed 6 or 7 homes, some 300 families evacuated. S&P futures are up 2.5. This is CBS News.
The Copperhead 1240, Southern Rock, Kicking Country, Tennessee Talk.
The Man Radio Station.
Copperhead 1240.
So, Freedom fans, you're listening to Preservative Talk Radio, brought to you by Freedom Ministries, where we confront the issues of the day on a constitutional basis, a biblical basis. And fellow Freedom fans, David Allen Carmichael, 888-248-2046. That's the number. Preservative Talk Radio, normally engaging the issues of the day on a constitutional basis, biblical basis, and the basis of right versus wrong. That's why we have a fairness doctrine of that toll-free number, 888-248-2046. Keeps me honest. I was talking today, this is a Faith and Freedom Friday is what it is. Our freedom comes in proportion to our faith, and I'm giving evidence of schizophrenia. I have voices in my head. This is not to mock people who have voices in their head that are driven by chemicals or even the dental work and living too close to an AM radio station. Sometimes that happens. There was a young lady we know kept telling her parents, I'm hearing voices. What do you mean voices? What are they saying? Well, right now it's 80 degrees and blah, 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 blah. She said, where are you getting that? And there's a song playing right now. And now they're saying this. Where are you getting this? And they figured out it was the local radio station lived by a 50,000 watt towers or something like that. It turned out it was because of her dental work was actually processing radio signals. It's strange but true. I don't know how it was working, but she was her own little transistor radio person. So it's not to mock people that have little instances of voices. But there's got to be an explanation for this idea of having such a strong impression that goes contrary to your normal thinking, normal, rational, survival thinking. The laws of nature are at work in your members, and you are doing what makes sense. And then suddenly something says, do the following thing. Now, I'll tell you, the first time that I really noticed that voice, when this young lady I was very attracted to, and this voice said, pursue her. Oh, that's good. Oh, God wants me to pursue you. And I've had some creepy people come up to married women, and these men were married, and they say, God wants me to marry you. Well, that's a demon, buddy. And because I'm going to punch you in the nose, and I don't think I'm going to be fighting against God. Okay? There's people can say some weird things saying that God spoke to them, but you shall know a tree by its fruit. It's going to be bearing good fruit, not bad fruit. It's not going to be blowing people up and murdering people. Yeah, God didn't tell you to take the life of the person in your womb. It's satanic. Jesus said he came that we might have life and have it abundantly. You can't have it abundantly if you don't have it at all. Anything contrary to that is literally satanic. So, story. Had this guy come talk to our church. He told a story about rebuking a congregation who got really depressed come offering time. And then after he rebuked him, the Lord rebuked him. He said, you got $7 in your pocket. What about that? Well, Lord, I needed a shaving kit. I can't give this money. This is just enough to buy what I need. And the Lord rebuked him. Said, well, you're a hypocrite. So he gives up the money. As soon as that speaking engagement night was over, somebody walks up to him, embarrassed, sheepishly saying, I think God spoke to me and he told me to bring you this. It was a shaving kit. Coincidence? Maybe they just have mutual schizophrenia. Concurrent. Now that's weird. How about the time when I was crying and whining and complaining, just like this guy, and the Lord was showing me I was being a hypocrite. I was not having faith. Here's my life and my ministry is supposed to be about faith. And I am whining because I don't have any stamps. I don't want to send these newsletters out to people who despise me, who are on my newsletter list. They're on my list, and they despise me. It's uncomfortable sending them a letter. And the Lord rebukes me, and I whine. I say, but, it's like Moses, but Lord, I can't speak. Okay, I'll send Aaron. You have no excuse. But Lord, I don't have any stamps. I don't have any money for stamps. It'd be sin for me to waste what few dollars we have, 10 or less, that ought to be buying bread for my children. It shouldn't be spent on stamps. Come on, think about it. And what shows up in the next few minutes? Stamps. Somebody who embarrassed, sheepishly thought they believed she heard God tell her to send me stamps. So is it true? Is this kind of stuff true? Our freedom comes in proportion to our faith. We do things because we think we're going to save ourselves. We're not. Or we will in our own little way and not really be saved. We really will not be in the position that we really wish we were in because of our lack of faith. We set ourselves into bondage because of pragmatism. We think we've got it figured out. We don't. So I got another story. I have to go back to this thing where the guy was preaching. And I said, well, hey, I want that kind of faith. I want to know what it's like to hear a voice from you, God, where I'm in a situation where if you don't come through, I'm going to die, or I'm going to be embarrassed, or I'm going to be humiliated, or it's going to be clear either that you spoke to me or you didn't. Something that where if I say, oh, God talked to me to do this, and then I fall flat on my face, it's because God didn't speak, but I was presumptuous. Or if God speaks and I tell somebody God spoke and I'm going to obey, and all of a sudden he shows off, hey, the odds of that happening, that goes beyond just statistical probability here. Not just 50-50, folks. So that's what I wanted. And at the end of the week, it was a Thursday night. Guy was his last speaking session. I showed up even though they didn't need me for music. I showed up and I listened. And just before they were closing, just as I am without one plea. They weren't singing, I go to the rock of my salvation. That's what I wish they were singing that, but they didn't. And I was just my brain was lollygagging, and suddenly I get this word from God. Last time I remember this was pursue her. Now I get a big, bold, scary interruption. Boom! Sell your mobile home. We lived in a mobile home. It's brand new. It's about 2 years old. We liked it better than an apartment. It had a lawn. We had dogs. The rent was the cost of the lot rent and the mobile home, and we're actually going to own something. was cheaper than an apartment, or at least equivalent, and we got the comforts of home. It was really nice. We liked it. It was movable. We liked it. I get a word that says, sell your mobile home. And I was like, what? Is that you, God? Oh, that's weird. And then sell your mobile home. Oh my goodness. Whoa. This is like supernatural. And then I thought, what? And then I thought, well, what am I going to do then? And then again, a strong sell your mobile home. Okay, God. Okay. I got it. I know this. I acknowledge you, Lord, because when I began to doubt, all of a sudden I realized, I felt the sin thing. I felt the wrath of God coming. Okay, I'll sell my mobile home. I turned to my wife and I said, God just spoke to me. She says, what did he say? I said, sell the mobile home. She says, what are we going to do then? I said, I don't know. My wife's pregnant at the time. You know, women like to have security, like to have a place that they're living in. After the church thing, I told my pastor, God spoke to me. What did he say? Sell the mobile home. What are you going to do then? I don't know. So, is that a hard thing? It's a small thing. Well, it turned out it became a hard thing. Selling a mobile home is not that big a deal, is it? Until it gets hard. Well, visited my mother-in-law, and I don't tell her the crazy faith things I got going on. At the time, it was 1987 Christmas. And so I just, it's none of her business. I finally, I said, I got to admit that, the Lord, I actually asked the Lord to speak to me. He spoke to me. He said, sell a mobile home. She was troubled. One, that you are listening to voices in your head. Two, that you're going to sell your wife's home out from under her when she's expecting a baby. So my mother-in-law says, with good common law of survival, conservation, the first law of thermodynamic sense, she says, well, you know what? Your wife's going to need a place to stay. You don't want a homeless wife and baby if you haven't got figured out what you're going to do. Why don't you wait till after the baby comes, then sell the mobile home nice, carefully. Don't just go crazy and sell your home out from your wife. So I said, well, a multitude of counselors there is safety. The fool does what is right in his own eyes, but he who listens to counsel is wise. So I said to her, oh, you know what? That's good counsel. That's good counsel. I'll do that. Well, I go back home after visiting my mother-in-law and mother and father-in-law. And the first sermon when I come back is our associate pastor. I go to Sunday school class, and he talks about standing on the word of God. And he uses scriptural things where God spoke, specifically said, do the following thing, and somebody do something else. And the point was, if God speaks to you, do it. If you know for sure God spoke to you, don't let anything else, even if it makes sense, come and interfere with your obedience. Oh my goodness. So guess what? I now have to go in my heart. I'm like, ooh, Lord, I'm not going to do what my mother-in-law said. I'm not going to call her and tell her that. I'm just not going to let her know that I'm just keeping on trying to sell this mobile home. And then February comes along. I get orders to the West Coast for a school. I was in the Navy. I get my wife to fly out there with me, so she can spend time with my family out in California, and we can spend time together when I'm not in class. And on the weekends, I had a rent-a-car. We could drive to LA from San Diego and do all kinds of great stuff. So it was really a neat thing. And she's sticking out by now. It's February. She's doing May, and I think she's doing the first week of May. And so she got kind of the torpedo belly. She's a very thin woman. She's got torpedo belly sticking out. And she says, and I tell my mother that, well, I told her what God told me. And my mother, first of all, is thinking, ooh, my son's hearing voices. I hope it's God. I appreciate his faith. And she said, David, your wife really, this is a time in a woman's life where she needs security. I worry for your marriage if you sell out from under your wife her security. And I said, you know what, Mom, you're the second person who's told me this. And you know what? So I made a vow to my mother. Now that I've heard it twice, this must be from God. And so now is where schizophrenia kicks in. Now it's my own thoughts and confusion. So I said, Mom, I make a vow to you. I will wait till after the baby is born, and then I will sell the mobile home. I'll wait. I can still obey God, but let's not put my wife at risk. Well, I go home to Virginia, And I listened to the Sunday sermon that morning. Now it's the pastor, and he's preaching a sermon very similar to what that guy did in January. But now he's preaching, now it's coming from the pulpit about if God tells you to do something, don't allow these things that may seem reasonable to distract you. What did God say? And be obedient. And is God wanting you to trust him or trust your reason? Oh my goodness. So now I have to, and we're going to get to a point here where it gets exciting. I had to go tell my mother. I had to recant my vow, and I had to tell her, listen, I know that God can sell this thing, and it's going to take him. We found out it's not real easy selling a mobile home. It's going to take divine intervention. I said, he could sell it 10 years from now. He can sell it 2 weeks from now, which would be great. Be the best thing to happen if he sell it 2 weeks from now. Give us time to find a place to live. I said, or he could sell it 2 weeks before the baby comes, which is the worst thing possible. The worst thing possible, 2 weeks before the baby comes, worst thing possible. But I know he spoke to me and I have to obey. I asked God to speak and he did. And now I can't go off of it. I have to obey it because I asked him to speak and he did. And my mom is terrified now. Now she's like, oh, but guess what? My mom's a prayer warrior. She got right to it, man. She started praying for me because she was afraid. I said, but Mom, notwithstanding, even if the worst thing happens, I have to obey what I heard. So the point is today, for those of you just tuning in, for especially atheists and young people in college, figuring out how smart you are, really, is it possible that is it possible the Bible's true? No, it can't be. Well, anecdotally, when I'm putting it into practice, weird things are happening. So I tell my mother, even if he doesn't come through, I'm going to obey. Well, that's when it got a little bit tricky, because what's really, 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 really going on here? Did God really speak? And it got a little bit scary. And so my wife is now a little bit scared with me. And so now we're on the hook to just indefinitely, possibly for the next 10 years, have nothing better to do than to wait to see if God's going to sell the mobile home. Or we're going to come back, we're going to find out what happened. It turns out that as the heat began to turn up, pressure suddenly gets on here. We have to go back and say, am I schizophrenic? Or did I hear a voice from God? When you do the voice from God thing, stand back and watch what happens. David Allen Carmichael, Preservative Talk Radio. Copperhead 1240, WEPG 910, 1190 WSDQ. We'll be right back.
NASCAR, Tennessee Talk, Southern Rock, Kickin' Country, Copperhead 1240, 1190, and 910 AM.
Any way that you kill somebody when they're innocent and defenseless is detestable.
My biological mother was 7.5 months pregnant when she had a saline abortion, which was meant to burn me both inside and out. And the doctors have also said that I should be blind and all of these horrendous things. Praise the Lord, the abortionist was not on duty the moment that I came into the world. Praise the Lord, the abortionist was not on duty the moment that I came into the world. I was actually delivered in an abortion clinic. Had he been there at the time, he could have ended my life with strangulation, suffocation, or leaving me there to die. But a nurse called an ambulance and had me transferred to a hospital. Had he been there at the time, he could have ended my life with strangulation, suffocation, or leaving me there to die. So then I was placed in the incubator, weighing 2 pounds, and they said I would die. And yet I just kept on living.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, at Nuganomics.com, weekdays 1 to 3 at 1240 Copperhead AM. Nuganomics.com. It's the home of Love Your Neighbor, Buy Local.
A great slogan.
Expect a mild start to your Friday. We'll see a few more clouds and a few scattered showers around. High temperatures still pleasant, right around 80 tonight. Lows into the mid-60s, and for the weekend, still a bit unsettled with scattered showers. Maybe a thunder shower popping up with highs through Sunday, only 80 to 82. When you're on the go, try Belvita breakfast biscuits. They're made with delicious ingredients and carefully baked to give you steady energy all morning long. That's Belvita. Try them as part of your morning routine. And I'm WDEF News 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Core.
So enjoy today, the Man Radio Station.
I will roll the world.
Hunting, fishing, NASCAR, Tennessee talk, Southern rock, kickin' country. 1240 The Copperhead.
CBS News, I'm Peter King. Egypt is mourning more than 600 people who were killed in this week's government crackdowns.
My relative was shot in the back with live ammunition. That destroyed his liver. He was killed in Rabat. We have a medical report from the hospital proving this. And now we have a burial permit.
Cairo is expected to be anything but quiet with an opposition protest scheduled to start shortly. CBS's Alex Ortiz is there.
The Muslim Brotherhood has called for marches and rallies today in what they're calling a day of rage. This after Egypt continued to count the death toll from the massacre 2 days ago. The Muslim Brotherhood says it will continue to protest peacefully, but there are real fears that Egypt's civil strife is only getting worse.
There's new trouble for embattled New York Yankee star Alex Rodriguez. CBS's Don Daler with a breaking story.
60 Minutes has learned that in February, members of Yankee slugger Alex Rodriguez's inner circle leaked handwritten documents implicating two other players in connection with baseball's doping investigation. In late January, the Miami New Times published an article highlighting Rodriguez's extensive use of performance-enhancing drugs and charged other unnamed players with also using PEDs. Sources say that days later, associates of Rodriguez at that time obtained copies of those same documents and gave them to Yahoo Sports, this time naming names.
Those names included Yankee teammate Francisco Cervelli and the Brewers' Ryan Braun. Rodriguez's attorney says the 60 Minutes report is, quote, untrue. A government spy agency isn't supposed to spy on Americans in this country, but a published report says it does. CBS's Larry Miller.
The NSA broke rules on privacy thousands of times each year since Congress granted it new powers in 2008, citing documents supplied by NSA leaker Edward Snowden. The Washington Post reports most breaches involved unauthorized surveillance of Americans or foreign intelligence targets inside the U.S. Digital rights advocate Trevor Timm.
This is what one would expect when there is little to no oversight of a massive secret surveillance program.
Most breaches were due to violating standard operating procedures.
Firefighters say they're gaining ground on the wildfire outside Park City, Utah. Some evacuees were allowed to go home briefly.
One young couple, we got the wedding dress. They were planning on getting married Saturday, and the dress was in the house, which was in the fire, and we were able to get that out.
Fire spokesman Steve Rutter says the flames are now about 50% contained. More than a dozen homes have been torched. New sexual harassment accusations against San Diego's Mayor Bob Filner. This time, Peggy Shannon, a 67-year-old part-time worker on the City Hall senior desk.
Every day that I went to work, I had butterflies in my stomach because I did not know what was going to happen the next time the mayor came by my desk.
She says it's time for Filner to go. He says he won't. S&P futures are up 4. This is CBS News.
The Copperhead 1240, Southern Rock, Kickin' Country, Tennessee Talk.
The Man Radio Station.
Copperhead 1240.
Fellow Freedom fans, David Allen Carmichael, Preservative Talk Radio, engaging these issues on a constitutional basis, biblical basis, the basis of right versus wrong. Today's a very special day. Everybody's special. Everybody's special. That's just saying that nobody's special. Special day today, talking about divine intervention or schizophrenia. You're either hearing voices in your head or it's possible. Is it possible there's something bigger than you, someone who has possibly created you, a literal, what they term the Heavenly Father, actually has the ability to communicate and have dialogue and relationship? Is it possible? I don't know. What does that have to do with the issues of the day? Oh boy, let me tell you what, when your day is ordered by a little divine intervention, things start happening and you prevail over the common man in a way that you could not do if you put your hand to it. There are certain advantages. You watch movies about these superheroes and wow, wouldn't it be good? Well, yeah, it is. Here we go. In our last exciting episode, I had this thing where I was told, I had a word, sell your mobile home. I was given advice saying, oh, don't do it. Your wife, she's going to have a baby. She needs security. And then, of course, I heard sermons reiterating, if you really know that Almighty God, creator of heaven and earth, has spoken to you and given you a command, a directive, do it. Don't get distracted by what you see. That's kind of crazy, right? But what if it's true? So I told my mother, listen, Mom, selling this mobile home, I found out is not something I can do to make it happen. It might take 10 years from now to do it. If God wants to take 10 years to do it, that's his prerogative. If he wants to do it 2 weeks to do it, that'll be great. We'll have a time to sell the mobile home and then find a place to live before the baby comes. That'll be great. Or he could do it 2 weeks before the baby comes, which would be the worst thing possible. But nonetheless, I know that God spoke to me. I asked him to do it, and I had better obey it. Literally, I told the Lord, please speak to me. I'd like to be able to obey, know what it is. I want that kind of faith. So my mom starts praying for me. Time's going on. My wife is sticking out more and more and more and more. Then sometime in April, one of the guys that I was working with in the youth ministry, he and his wife came to us and they said, we're so excited. Oh my goodness, there's this house and we can't afford it. He was an E4 in the Air Force, not quite yet being paid for E4. And here was a house that would normally go in this area at the time for about $94,000. That today would be $189,000 to $225,000, depending on what neighborhood you're in. But at the time, that's about what this kind of house that he's describing. Now, it turns out that my wife and I, when we were going on bike rides or motorcycle rides down by the beach and we had no children, we had time on our hands, we'd go to the library and we'd look up books. We found a book that says, hey, plan on your dream home now. How do you plan for your dream home? Why waste your time shopping for houses someday? Do your plans now. Know what you want. So we started sitting down and we had made a list. Wow, if we had our favorite house, if the world was perfect, what would we like? Well, we'd like to be real close to our church. At the time, we were 34 miles away. And, just close to the church, very close to the church. And we'd like to have like a 2-story colonial. We'd like a fireplace. We'd like a big backyard, enough for our dogs, for volleyball, and for spectators. And, that much of an area. Keep those things separate from each other. Obviously, there's certain things you don't want on the volleyball court. So have the dogs in one area, volleyball, and then spectators. People hang out and fellowship while you're playing volleyball. And we'd like to have plenty of room for parking. And at the time, we were using our driveway grass area for parking. We could really only fit 2 cars where the mobile home was. So we thought, well, it'd be good. I've got a parking lot across the street from my house right now, by the way. So but we wanted plenty of parking. Want it close to church, 2-story colonial. Oh, we're going to need a refrigerator because if we ever sold this mobile home, it would, certain things would go with it. There's certain things we would have to leave. And so there was a list of things that we wanted. And then this guy's and we also did the math. If I ever got promoted to chief petty officer, what could we afford? Because right now we couldn't afford this house at all. Couldn't even come close. But maybe if I was chief petty officer and getting that kind of pay, maybe we could afford something like we're describing. So I did the math. At the time, the interest rate was 9.5%. And I did the math and figured if we got we could afford a house that was $77,500 at 9.5% interest. That was the best that I figured we could qualify for. And we didn't know if the house that was on our dreams would fit that. Turns out shopping later, no, it wouldn't. The house we were looking for, that type of house, was about $94,000. All we could afford was $77,500 at 9.5% interest. At the time we're selling our mobile home, the interest rate had gone up to 10.5%. So that would decrease it a bit more, wouldn't it? Well, this guy comes up and tells us, and he says, there's this house, he describes it, and it's really a few hundred feet from our church. You can walk through the apartments across the street and get to the church backyard. So it's very close to our church. And it's exactly what we had described. And he said, and the cost is $77,500. And because it's a VA repossession sale, it's 1% below the standard rate. So it's at 9.5% interest. So here's our dream home for the exact amount that we knew that we had qualified for. And it would have otherwise not been affordable to us. And all of a sudden we're getting excited, like, I think there's a miracle going on here. And I told my friend Sam, I said, Sam, I don't mean to steal your house, man, but I think you're God's messenger to me. So we go over and look at the house, and we see this house, and we're like, oh my goodness, it's right around the corner from the church, or it's through the parking lot of the apartment complex if you want to drive or walk. Either way you want to go. And so it's exactly what we wanted. It's kind of like between the church and our pastor's house. Where else would we want to be? And it was exactly what we wanted. Had plenty of property. It was a third of an acre, which was about appropriate. And we said, oh my goodness, this is exactly what we've always wanted. And it's exactly the price. And it's about $15,000 cheaper than we would have to pay for it, even on sale. So it was really weird. So we're thinking, oh my goodness, God, is this house ours? And so we're getting excited about a house that we don't own, and we still have a mobile home. What do we do? Well, we got some advice. Somebody said, well, just put in the paperwork, just put in a bid what they're asking, and put in a little thing there that says, hey, contingent upon our sale of our mobile home. And so we put it in. Well, the VA calls us back immediately and says, you have got to be kidding. How long do you want us to sit around for your mobile home to sell? Well, I don't know. How much can you? He says, well, I'll give you about, I don't know, give you like 2 weeks or something like that. He told me it's going to be I think it was a Friday or something like that. He gave me a Friday in the future. And so it was about 2 weeks along. It was about 2 weeks down the road that if your thing doesn't sell by this Friday that's listed here, so it was about 2 weeks from our submitting the paperwork initially, then I'm just going to the next envelope because I have to do that. I have to disqualify you first, but I'm going to give you that much time. If you can't get this together, I'm going to the next envelope and open that up. That's the process they were in at the time. First, it was the highest bidder. And then it was if nobody meets that standard, now we're going to go one at a time. So I go, oh no, we got to sell this mobile home. So we don't know what to do. And we're praying, guess what? This thing ain't selling. In fact, it's harder to sell it at the time. The interest rates had gone up and people weren't buying mobile homes. It was just really kind of scary. It's kind of weird. In fact, to buy ours, it was actually cheaper to buy a brand new one than it is to buy ours. So it wasn't looking too good. And then a couple was really weird. We're really excited because the salesman said, the broker guy says, hey, if you get somebody to sign a lease for a year with the option to buy, that will qualify to having that mobile home debt taken care of, and you can get the house. So what was interesting is that weekend, on a Saturday, we get a phone call. And this guy says, hey, I'd like to know if I could lease your mobile home for a year with an option to buy. So that supposedly would be an answer to our goals to get a house. But in my heart, I had made a vow. God said, sell the mobile home. Now I said, well, he says, we're going to think about it. We're going to call you back tomorrow. Okay, call me back. Make sure it's after church, but call me back on Sunday. So before the guy calls, I told my wife, and this is like the Sunday before the Friday deadline. I told my wife, you know what? God has said that we're not supposed to rent it, lease it, we're supposed to sell it. He didn't tell us to go buy a house. He said, sell the mobile home. And he says, I've got enough sense now that I know it doesn't matter how attractive this is. We're not supposed to get distracted. So when this people called me on Sunday, and I said, thank you for your offer, but no. And he said, well, what's the matter? What do you want? A certain amount of money down or something? I said, no. I said, God told me to sell my mobile home. He didn't tell me to lease it. I'm supposed to sell it. And if you don't want to buy it, I can't sell it to you. And he was actually offended. He's like, well, are you making this up? No, I'm seriously, God told me. So here I lose a chance to get this house. The house is our dreams for about, 20% below what the normal price is. Then Tuesday comes along and we get a call from the Veterans Administration. It says, have you sold this mobile home yet? I need to do something about this house. I said, no. He says, well, you have till Friday. Or I brought up to him, you said we have till Friday. Okay, you've got till Friday, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. So I said, well, you've given me till Friday. Please let me have till Friday. So my wife and I, on Tuesday night, we prayed. And I said, God, you told us, you gave me a word, and then so we're struggling, we're whining, we're complaining. We had a chance to get this house. It's a house of our dreams. We got all excited about it. We're thinking it's a God thing that we're supposed to have this house. He didn't tell us. It's just we felt it, And so we complained and we whined and we said, nevertheless, Lord. And my wife's about to she's due for a baby at this time. And I said, whatever you do, we said together, whatever your plan is, we're going to stick with it. We're going to trust you, even as difficult as it is. Some people say, you wish I had those kind of difficulties. But Tuesday night, after an hour and a half of whining, complaining, crying, praying, on our face, literally on our face, we gave in. Wednesday, I was working out in the yard, and the planes were flying over our head. We had A6 intruders flying over only a couple of 100 feet above our head. We could see the pilots' faces and having to cover our ears because of how painful the sound was. A guy walks up and he says, hey, is this thing still for sale? I said, yeah. Long story short, this guy, by the next day, on Thursday, had given me down payment money to buy the mobile home. By Friday, I had all the paperwork to the VA, and the VA said, I will determine a date for closing. I called the mobile home place who was going to arrange the sale of the mobile home to this guy. And they said, we will arrange a date for the closing. The VA calls back and he says, May 11th, 1988. May 11th, so the next week on I guess Wednesday, or I'm trying to think what it was. May 11th, 1988, we're going to close on the house, on the mobile home. Oh, no, the mobile home, VA said we're going to close on Thursday. Close on Thursday, May 12th. The mobile home company called, and they hadn't been talking to the VA. They don't care about the VA. They said, we're going to close the mobile home sale on May 11th. So we're out of a house on May 11th, in a house, unoccupied house on May 12th. Now that, you could say, is that a coincidence? Let me tell you what happened. What did I say? Those of you just tuned in, I had said when somebody told me to use my good sense, don't sell your mobile home out from under your wife. And I told my mother, but God told me to sell it. And even if he sells this thing 2 weeks before the baby comes, which is the worst thing possible, I've got to do what he told me to do. And the thing sold on May 11th, 1988. Now you tell me, is this a coincidence or divine providence, the mighty work of God showing himself strong on behalf of those whose hearts are loyal to him? My daughter was born 2 weeks to the day. We didn't intervene. By natural inspiration, was 2 weeks late, by the way. 2 weeks to the day after the mobile home sold, my daughter was born. That was what I said was the worst thing possible. Even if, now it wasn't the worst thing, but I'm saying as far as our eyes could see, to be homeless 2 weeks before the baby came would have been the worst thing possible. It would have been just catastrophic. But nonetheless, what happened is God miraculously gave us a house that was a house of our dreams for exactly what we could afford, well below the market price. The day, able to walk in the day after the mobile home closed, and my daughter was born 2 weeks to the day afterward. So the story is today, it's kind of going off the normal beaten path for this Preservative Talk Radio. But I often say our freedom comes in proportion to our faith. And am I, the question always is, literally willing, do we have the faith to actually seek God and find out what his will for our life is by reading the Bible and doing it, even if we're in elected office? By praying and asking him what his intention is and doing it, even if we're in elected office? Or are we in bondage to our own fears? David Allen Carmichael, Preservative Talk Radio, preservativetalkradio.com. These archives at preservativetalkradio.net. I'm saving this. You'll be able to find it at copperhead1240.com.
You can listen to Copperhead Radio everywhere. On your AM radio at 1240, 910, or 1190. On the net, go to copperhead1240.com. Take Copperhead Radio to listen on the go. On your smartphone, download TuneIn. Then search for Copperhead 1240. Watch the Copperhead live at Ustream.tv. And of course, you can always follow us on Twitter at Copperhead Radio. And like us at Facebook.com/Copperhead1240. So there you go. Whether you're listening on the radio, watching us on television, taking us along with your smartphone, or just socializing on Facebook, make Copperhead Radio a part of your daily routine.
Copperhead 1240, Southern Rock, kicking country, Tennessee talk.
The Man Radio Station. Hunting, fishing, NASCAR, Tennessee talk, Southern Rock, kicking country. Copperhead 1240, 1190, and 910 AM.
Fellow Freedom fans, David Allen Carmichael. These things are being saved right now at www.copperhead1240.com. It'll take me a few minutes to update the text and things like that to make sure that this video is able to be seen. If you'd like to take your, if this is something strange you've never heard, this kind of thing said, it's going to be available at 1240, copperhead1240.com. Stories in real life. Stories, I'm typing it right now on our Facebook. Stories in real life of divine intervention. Some call it providence. Some say, oh, you know, God doesn't talk to you. He used to do that. He doesn't do it anymore. Well, they may have firsthand knowledge of God not speaking to them. He only speaks in the Bible. No, he does speak in the Bible. The Bible is recording of God speaking. And I'm not saying he's going to tell me a new thing that's going to change the Bible. But sometimes God tells me exactly what he wants me to do. And you say, well, it's providence. You don't have a choice. Whether I have a choice or not, I don't care. He's let me in on his plan. Let's just put it that way. What a blessing. What a blessing that the Lord clues me in on what he's doing. And sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes I see after the fact. I pray. I ask him, Lord, what do you want me to do? Sometimes I get a clear direction. Sometimes it interferes with what makes sense to me. I said, well, Lord, you know, suddenly I feel like I'm in sin if I do what makes sense. What's up with that? And I check and I pray. And the Lord shows me, no, do what I'm asking you to do. Okay, I'll do it. I hope it's you, because it's going to look pretty stupid. And I don't think it's going to benefit anybody if I do something on some just whimsical if it doesn't make sense. But I say often our freedom comes in proportion to our faith. This whole thing started today as I was reviewing today, and I think, what should I do today? Today is a story day. You're going to hear stories in real life. So I told you about the thing where I heard the guy, the preacher, who was arguing with God about giving his last $7 to the offering plate where he was a guest speaker. He said, but Lord, this was for a shaving kit. And he was mad because God rebuked him over his lack of faith, and here he is preaching on faith. So he reluctantly, whiningly, begrudgingly was obedient, put his $7 in the till. And then after the sermon was over, after everybody's kind of doing the afterglow, talking to him, whatever, some guy comes up to him. He says that he was sheepishly, I believe God told me to bring this to you today. Like he was kind of embarrassed. And what was it? A shaving kit. I told the story of arguing with God, being mad about these letters I was sending to people that even didn't like me. And Lord rebuking me and showing me that I had no faith, and that here I'm trying to teach people about faith and I don't have any. And I was whining, and that those people were on the list that I had for mailing because those are the people that the Lord had on the list. And to just do it. And then I said, but Lord, I don't even have stamps. And what shows up literally within minutes of me whining about that? The mail is retrieved, and in the envelope are stamps from somebody who later told me they believe God told me to send, told them to send stamps. And they argue with God. But God, that's stupid. Okay. Or not stupid, but Lord, he could use money. If I send him money, he can buy stamps. Lord said, no, I want you to send him stamps. And look what happened to rebuke me. Our freedom comes in proportion to our faith. There's just a gazillion times in the Bible, in one case, a king was rebuked. The king says, well, I had to make a sacrifice to the Lord. You weren't here, and I needed to make a sacrifice to the Lord. And you weren't here, so I started without you. And the prophet had told the king, wait for me. Don't do anything until I get there. This is a word from God for you. Don't do anything till I get there. But you tarried. You weren't here at the appointed time. So I made the sacrifice for you instead of you. And he rebuked him, and he said, this prophet said to the king Saul, to obey is better than sacrifice. To heed rather than the fat of lambs. So we give a lot of lip service to Jesus. We get lip service to our atheism, bless our hearts. We get lip service to our faith. To obey is better than sacrifice. To heed rather than the fat of lambs. But Lord, I'll look like an idiot. Oh Lord, it'll look like I'm going contrary to my doctrine or dogma or whatever it is I've been teaching. To obey is better than sacrifice, to heed rather than the fat of lambs. Our freedom comes in proportion to our faith. Our country's in the state where it is because we're operating according to our fear rather than our faith. And then we abandon divine intervention. We abandon the blessings of God demonstrating his power by filling us with his spirit daily and giving us wisdom beyond our wiseness, and talking to people who are willing to obey and listen. And all the things come together. When we need stamps, they show up. I had another story about one time when I was just in panic, just panicking. Man, Lord, I obeyed you. I'm out of a job. Now I'm not going to survive. And I'll have to tell you that story some other time. But there was a time when I was afraid to give money away. And I was bitter at being out of a job. And here was a guy with a job who I knew was going to ask me for money, because that's what he did. When I had a job and I had money, he would ask for me for money every time I saw him, and I would give him money. Felt pretty pious about it. And now I'm out of a job, having to trust God, and I see this guy who needs a ride to work like he normally did, and normally I would give him one. But I knew at the end of that ride he was going to ask me for money, and I was angry. And that's a long story. You got to hear the story. It's a good story. But within a matter of 24 hours, I realized how much I was not really, really, really true to my confession of actually believing God. And then, of course, we saw a miracle. And I could tell you a gazillion stories. There was a day that I needed $9,000. And I was in fear, and I was going to do something weird. And I was going to do something awkward, but I was justifying it in my head because I needed the money. And when I gave up and I said, Lord, I'm just going to trust you. I'm just going to quit my crazy stuff, my crazy trying to make it look holy and righteous, what I'm doing. I'm just going to shut up and I'm going to trust you. Somebody walks up to me and says, David, you have a need. I was in the back of the room. This has never happened to me before, but God spoke to me. And he told me that you have a need. And he actually went into detail about it, though he was confused because it didn't make sense to him. He went and basically spoke exactly what the problem was. That's pretty weird, isn't it? Is he schizophrenic? Is it a demon glorifying God? I don't think so. And he says, you have a need. And I said, and I told him the story of my wrestling with God for 2 months. And finally that evening, the night before, and even that morning saying, God, I'm just going to trust you. I'm not going to do anything stupid. And this guy walks up to me and he says, God told me you have a need. What is it? I said $9,000. He cuts a check. Has that ever happened to you? Somebody walk up to you and say, God told me you have a need and I'm supposed to meet it. That's what he told me. And I'm supposed to meet it. So I told him I need $9,000. Where do I send it? That really happened to me. Another day, I was in meltdown. I needed over $13,000. I needed $1,600 that was overdue, or my kids were going to get sent home from college. And I needed another little over $12,000 for them to continue for the next semester. And I struggled and I disobeyed. And I said, I've got to do this. I don't want to do my job today. I'm going to do this because I've got to save my own life. And the Lord rebuked me, told me to do my job, my ministry job. Don't go sell things. Just do your job, Mr. Faith. Obey me. Do your job. What did I tell you to do today, David? Well, you told me to get connected in Virginia, whatever that means. Well, then do it. So first 2 calls I make, talk to one of the people I just talked to a couple of years ago. First 2 calls I make, 2 cold calls, both men told me that God had put me on their brains. One had never met me. The other one had met me and talked to me a couple of times. But they're effectively strangers to me. But God the week before had put me on their brains, they told me. So that's a little bit weird divine intervention, or we're all schizophrenic at the same time. And then 2 hours later, within 2 hours, I get a phone call. One took care of the $1,600 need. A little bit, 2 hours later, I get another phone call, takes care of the $12,000 need. God told me, they both said, God told me I was supposed to meet this need in your life. Wow. What is it? One guy, they both had to say, well, how much is it? I'm supposed to do this. How much is it? Well, I need $1,600 sent to the college now. Done. Well, I need $1,600 sent to, or $12,000 sent to the college within the next week or so. Done. So those are stories in real life. Is it true for all those of you going to college out there? And by the way, these 2 college students, one did 5 years of college. The other had done 4 years of college and never filled out a FAFSA. And we are dirt poor. We are poor, more poor than you could ever imagine. So they survived college. They don't, both of these people, my youngsters, they don't have any debt. I do. I did some stupid things and I got in debt. And I've got to deal with that. But those, imagine going through college right now and coming out with 0 debt and not having the government intervene. No grants, no student loans, nothing tied into the United States federal beneficiary program, and being poor when you do it, being well below the poverty line when you do it. Our freedom comes in proportion to our faith. So that's why we're here at Preservative Talk Radio. I've recorded this at copperhead1240.com as a video. It's kind of a long one. But if you're contemplating these things and you think, this guy is nuts or he's right on target, I've got a phone number. It's 888-248-2046. 888-248-2046. Some of the things that I mentioned, you'll be hearing periodically, some of these stories. There's more stories to tell. And we've got more stories to come. And so what we've got to do is address these issues of the day. I always do it on a constitutional basis, biblical basis, the basis of right versus wrong, because the goal is to really push reset in our minds. And of course, ultimately, my goal is, if you listen to me, my hope is that you're going to be interested in knowing the author of the plan of my salvation, of knowing the one who wrote the book that I read, that told me about these things, how to have life and have it abundantly, and to have the ability to do things beyond my own wisdom, and to have things that happen that are literally beyond explanation. So that's it. I'm David Allen Carmichael, and I want you to continue to listen to this Preservative Talk Radio. If you have any questions about anything, even an issue in the day, issue in the news, you can send us an email. If you go to preservativetalkradio.com, there's a box there that you can fill in, and then it'll allow you to send an email to me. If you'd like have a question on any issue of the day, whether it's a biblical issue or if it's a question about an issue of the day and what you think my take is on it. Hopefully I'll respond in something that it's not merely what my opinion is. I'll try to find some research and say, based on the following things, both in the Bible and the Constitution and the foundations of law, as far back as I can reach, what should my opinion be? And that's my goal. So if you send me an email, go to our preservativetalkradio.com. Hopefully I'll be able to give you some kind of insight that would help you frame the approach that you take on figuring out what your policy should be on the issue. So that's my goal there. And again, anytime during the broadcast, you give us a call, 888-248-2046. You're heckling as long as it's constructive. You disagree. I've had times when the callers disagree with me, and I've had to step back and go, ooh, you've got a good point. I'm going to have to rethink this. Maybe I've only touched a bit on this. I've hit one facet of this special diamond of truth that we're talking about here. But then sometimes I've had callers with very strong opinions hear my other way of looking at it. On the other hand, I get my Topol comes out of me. On the other hand, unheard of, unthinkable. And we try to approach things in such a way that we're not just furthering our little political prerogatives, our political passions that are all going to burn eventually. How are we going to be able to really keep ourselves and our societies and our communities thriving? So I appreciate the owner of Copperhead 1240 at WSDT was partnered with WEPG 910 AM and WSDQ 1190 AM. But Copperhead 1240, that's WSDT, and the owner of that station is doing great sacrifice for the community of Saudi Daisy, Tennessee, Hickson, and surrounding areas, Ray County, Hamilton County, and the other counties that are in the broadcasting area, even those in Georgia and Alabama. Our hope is that we're doing our part to save one another here. So keep tuning this Copperhead 1240. David Toulis is coming up. He's going to talk about some things from an interesting local-centric perspective with a biblical salty taste. David Allen Carmichael, Preservative Talk Radio, preservativetalkradio.com, archives, preservativetalkradio.net.
Okay. Man radio station, hunting, fishing, NASCAR, Tennessee talk, Southern rock, chicken country, WSDQ.